the world of tennis just blew apart. Moreover, we're not discussing some courteous a contentious line or a handshake disagreement make a call. We are discussing an worldwide occurrence with one of the best champions in history claiming to have dropped the word, thousands of chaotic supporters, and an emerging superstar trapped at the exact middle of a potentially destructive firestorm shutting down the whole place. They do not want you to tell this tale. Understand, but we'll let you know everything. Imagine this. Melbourne, Australia. The sun is shining brightly on among the top 4 tennis competitions worldwide. The Australian Open. Grand Slam success is at stake. Award money of millions of dollars. Career-defining events taking place on each court. Additionally, in the rear, concealed like a disgraceful secret on a court so tiny that you could almost they've struck the back fence and sneezed, pushed one of the most talented young athlete stars. Alex Ellie is her name, and what transpired with her has caused a disagreement that is so widespread that legends voicing one's opinion. Fans want clarification, and the whole tennis facility is rushing to hide their footprints. However, this is where the tale begins. Fascinating to completely explosive. Martina Navratilova, 18-time Grand Slam champion tennis royalty, a winner, and a lady who has never shied away from calling out injustice regardless of who it annoys, is said to have had enough. According to sources that are sweeping throughout tennis circles and social media, Martina didn't just raise a question about what occurred. She didn't just say worry or disillusionment. She reportedly launched a verbal attack that made a direct incision to the bone using 3 utterances that have shocked others the game. What is the reason behind the racism? Allow those words take a while to register. Among the most reputable voices in the history of tennis, allegedly blaming the Australian Open, among the golden gems of racial sports prejudice. This isn't a stranger on Twitter is causing problems. This is a lady named Martina Navratilova, whose there is no doubt about credibility. Apparently examining the circumstances and seeing anything so essentially incorrect that she was driven to use the most you may make a severe allegation in sports in the modern era. And it becomes much more bizarre. Melbourne is still coping with the consequences, while tournament planners are dealing with what is being described as a 24-hour deadline to provide an explanation or be subject to a formal inquiry. Alex has already gone. She has arrived in Manila, similar like a warrior coming home from war, and she has exacted retribution on her mind. The Women's Open in the Philippines is I'm going to see something unique. Moreover, obstructing her path in the first round is a rival from Russia who completely destroyed her 6 years ago. People, this isn't just tennis anymore. This is private. This relates to national pride. This is to demonstrate that they attempted to bury the girl on a back court is really unstoppable in Melbourne. Greetings from the Alex Ellie saga, the most exciting tennis story at the moment, and we will walk you through each startling detail. Let's begin at the starting because the catastrophe didn't begin with a smash of a racket or a contentious call. It began with a decision is incredibly foolish that people are currently attempting to determine if it was either incapacity or something else entirely. More ominous. Alex Ellie shows up at the Australian Open is rated 49th globally. I'll say it again because it's crucial. 49. That isn't a fortunate qualification who the rounds were scratched through. That isn't a wild card in the hopes of a miracle. That's every Grand Slam player in the top 50 junior level pedigree, where she won a WTA championship after winning Wimbledon. Completed and equipped with a social media after which players would be rated among the top 10 envious. This chick has more than 1 million followers, observing her every action on Instagram by themselves. She has made appearances in international marketing initiatives. She has been included in well-known sports documentaries. The Philippines, a country with 115 million people, she's not only well-known, she is a national treasure. She is what LeBron James is a basketball player. Relating to football, Cristiano Ronaldo. She is transcending. Thus, when the schedule for the Australian Open is released, everyone anticipates seeing her name on one at the show courts. Rod Laver Arena may not have the absolute greatest names, but unquestionably Margaret Court Arena, or at least 3 locations in show court that may really allow a suitable turnout and provide fans with an opportunity to witness a sporting event emerging superstars. Rather, the tournament organizers in what must be among the most disastrous errors in the most recent Grand Slam, she was placed on court 6 in history. For those who are unaware, Melbourne Park, Court 6 is what tennis experts kindly refer to as a backcourt and the things that the others would a pretentious practice facility, if you will. It may accommodate several hundred people if you stuff them in like tube sardines. No large displays are present. There's very little infrastructure. It's the kind of location where matches are scheduled between players that weren't at the top. 200 is not a worldwide celebrity who offers everywhere she travels. She has thousands of admirers. The decision was accepted right away. Bewilderment and rage. Tennis in the Philippines' social media communities exploded. How could they have made such a blatant error? Someone would undoubtedly notice the mistake and transfer the contest, correct? Incorrect. The organizers of the competition increased their efforts. The game continued on Court 6. Additionally, what followed was completely expected to a half-witted person, but seems to come as a total surprise to the individuals in charge of one of the largest athletic competitions worldwide. Hours the crowd began to arrive before the game began. Not several dozen, not several hundred thousands. We are discussing a tsunami of Filipino backers, many of whom had came from all throughout Australia. Some individuals who had really taken a plane from the Philippines, especially to see the competition of their idol, the Grand Slam arena. They arrived with flags the size of beds. Sheets. They had drums with them and trumpets sporting crimson face paint, yellow, blue, and white of the Philippine flag. They arrived prepared to start a tennis match. Into a moment, a festival, or a celebration of unadulterated patriotic pride. Additionally, there was not a single place to put them. The scenes outside Court 6 soon came to an end. Into complete anarchy. The restricted within minutes, capacity was attained. The security staff discovered themselves utterly overpowered as thousands of desperate fans crowded up against barricades. For a view of the action at all, the queues were long for the witnesses, characterized as snaking in hundreds of meters over the competition site like an irate snake. Individuals were smashed together in the intense heat in Australia. Anger erupted. There were arguments. The likelihood that we would desire Alex rang out throughout Park in Melbourne. Even players can hear it. Warming up for half an hour on the practice courts a mile distant. Security for the tournament was compelled to request emergency backup. Local law enforcement was on alert in case the problem became worse. First, what ought to have been a routine round contest has become into a real safety emergency. And everything, every piece of the mayhem was totally preventable if a participant enters the competition office had just completed their assignments. An acknowledged fact. However, this is where the narrative becomes more darker, and amid the inquiries that no one in tennis wants to respond and begins to the exterior. Fans began performing their personal investigation. They examined each other. Matches that were planned for that day on the program courts. They began compiling lists contrasting rankings and drawings power contrasting narratives, and what they discovered infuriated them. Participants positioned lower than the one ELA was playing on larger courts. Participants with smaller the treatment of followers was improved. Gamers with less interesting storylines, less celebrity power, less of everything that issues in contemporary sports entertainment, were placed in prominent locations while Alex Ella was concealed like in humiliation. The discussions on social media intensified. Heated. The term disrespect began trending all around the world. And then came the doubt that no one in tennis the administration wishes to address, it would not disappear no matter how much they disregarded it. Was racism involved here? Here's another illustration of the tennis facility that treats athletes from non-traditional tennis-playing countries from the global south, Southeast Asia as second-class citizens. Nonetheless, their standing, their accomplishments, their renown. They weren't fringe. Internet trolls are voices attempting to stir up controversy. These were long-standing respected sports, tennis fans, journalists, leaders of the Filipino community, and advocacy groups inquiring justifiable, awkward questions regarding institutionalized prejudice in how competitions distribute their most important resources, visibility, and court time. There was a full-blown Australian Open. They are facing a public relations crisis. Martina Navratilova then purportedly entered the ring and produced for them. Everything became exponentially worse. Martina Navratilova is not a person who speaks irresponsibly. She isn't a reactive and attention-seeking. She's a Hall of Famer whose viewpoint is massive weight during the tennis match world. People pay attention when she speaks. People pay when she criticizes. Focus. Additionally, when she supposedly looked at the Alexella circumstance and inquired, simply put, why is there racism, she changed the contentious situation into a complete emergency. We must now recognize the identity of Martina Navratilova and why her voice is so important. This lady is a former employee of Czechoslovakia under communism to pursue liberty and tennis glory. She battled for equal prize money during the time that women were paid only a small portion of what men made. She came out as gay in public when it might have ruined her career and endorsement agreements. She has been a vocal supporter of LGBTQ rights, social justice, and fairness throughout her life in sports. When Martina Navratilova refers to it as loaded and as grave as racism, she's failing to carelessly. She's producing a deliberate declaration that something is essentially flawed in the system. Reports that are making the rounds through tennis media and going viral on social media networks, the critique of Navratilova concentrated on a number of disastrous points. First, the total inability to acknowledge Alexella is a worldwide sensation who has developed. This goes beyond simply using a computer to rank numbers. This is regarding comprehending contemporary tennis environment in which players can have enormous impact and attractive power that surpasses their present standing in the rankings. Disregarding Yella's obvious star power is more than just poor business. According to reports, Navratilova argued, it's deliberate blindness. Secondly, and this is where it penetrates deeply, the seeming double norm. According to reports, Navratilova discovered that if this player were from Britain, an Australian or American athlete player with a ranking half that of Yella and a small portion of her fanbase, they would have received top placement without query. The implication was profound and obvious. Uneasy. The tennis facility continues to act with unconscious prejudices, or perhaps even aware ones, that players should be highlighted, and which can be moved to the periphery according to where they originate. Thirdly, the security consequences by establishing a circumstance where thousands of supporters were turned away access and abandoned in a potentially hazardous situation, conditions of crowding. The competition had failed to uphold its fundamental duty of care. This was more than just awkward. Navratilova claimed that it was careless and hazardous and completely preventable if the organizers had just acknowledged actuality. The reaction to Navratilova's "The tennis world was divided over alleged remarks." Directly in the center, fans of progressivism, and she received a lot of praise from the tennis media for expressing the urgently needed stated. They contended that tennis has a long history, had an issue with the way it handles players from developing nations, that the athletic power structures are still dominated by North American and European interests, and that it was just the most recent and most obvious manifestation of that prejudice. Conversely, the tournament defenders and a few traditionalists resisted, difficult, maintaining that this was only an regrettable scheduling error, not proof of institutionalized discrimination. They maintained that attributing it to racism was excessive, and that error occur, that there was no malevolent intention, but the harm was already done. The narrative had left the boundaries of Filipino communities and tennis forums pages. It was now a worldwide story. Major international sports outlets were grabbing it. The expression "the open racism scandal in Australia" was trending worldwide across a variety of platforms. Additionally, the organizers of the tournament, who had been annoyingly quiet during the first dispute, discovered themselves up against a concerted demand from communities and fan groups in the Philippines groups, as well as sports advocacy networks. The request was straightforward and terrible. They desired responses within 24 hours. They desired an official justification for the scheduling choice. They demanded an apology for the mayhem and the disdain. Additionally, if they didn't receive it, they would take the situation to the International Tennis Federation, requesting an official inquiry into potential bias in court allocations and Grand Slam scheduling procedures happenings. This was no longer only about one game, one participant, or one competition. This turned into a referendum on how diversity is handled in tennis, how it values various markets, and whether the sport is genuinely dedicated to being the worldwide inclusive game as continuously says they are. However, despite all of this dispute, all of this mayhem, all of these global incidents and threats, a real tennis match was still in progress. That needed to be performed. Additionally, Alexella, in the Storm's direct line of sight, still needed to enter that small, overcrowded court 6 and compete at the highest level of professional tennis. The pressure on her young shoulders was absolutely immense. Not only was she making her Australian Open main draw debut, One of the biggest moments in any player's career. She was doing it with the weight of an entire nation's expectations, a logistical nightmare unfolding around her, and a growing international incident that she never asked for and had no control over. Her opponent was Alicia Parks of the United States, a powerful 23-year-old with a dangerous game built around a massive serve and aggressive baseline hitting. Parks came into the match ranked 97th in the world, making this a legitimate competitive match between a rising star and a dangerous opponent capable of beating anyone on her day. When Alex Aya walked onto court 6, the noise was absolutely deafening. Every available seat was filled. Every standing room spot was packed to capacity. The fans who had successfully made it inside, the lucky few out of thousands, were determined to make enough noise for everyone who couldn't get in. It was less like a tennis match and more like a football derby or a championship boxing bout. The atmosphere was electric, intimidating, and utterly unique for a first-round Grand Slam match. And for the first 30 minutes, it looked like Alexia Lowe was going to ride that massive wave of energy straight into the second round and silence every critic. She came out firing on every single cylinder. Her movement was crisp and precise. Her ball striking was clean and aggressive. Her shot placement was absolutely surgical. Alicia Parks, for all her power and talent, looked completely overwhelmed by both the player across the net and the raucous crowd surrounding them. Ayala broke Parks' serve early and never looked back in that opening set. She was painting the lines, hitting winners from impossible angles, showing the kind of fearless, aggressive tennis that has made her such an exciting prospect. The Filipino fans were in absolute raptures. Every point Ayala won was celebrated like a Grand Slam championship. The chants never stopped. The energy never dipped for a second. And when Ella closed out the first set, 6-0, delivering a bagel to her American opponent in front of this wild, passionate crowd, it felt like destiny was unfolding before everyone's eyes. A 6-love opening set in your Grand Slam main draw debut against a top 100 opponent in front of thousands of your countrymen. This was the stuff of sports movies. This was the moment that was supposed to silence all the critics, answer all the questions about scheduling and respect, and announce to the entire tennis world that Alex Ella had truly arrived on the biggest stage. The script was absolutely perfect. However, tennis, as any true fan knows, doesn't follow scripts. Tennis has a cruel, almost sadistic way of teaching humility exactly when you think you've got everything figured out. The second set began and something shifted. Alicia Parks, to her immense credit, made adjustments. She stopped trying to match Ella's pace and variety and started imposing her own power game. She began serving bigger, taking the ball earlier, refusing to be intimidated by the partisan crowd. Where she had looked tentative and overwhelmed in the first set, she now looked determined and hazardous. And slowly, inexorably, the momentum began to swing. However, here's where the story takes another complicated turn that nobody wants to talk about. The crowd that had been such an incredible asset for Ayala in the first set became a double-edged sword in the second. The Filipino fans, desperate to help their hero, started crossing lines of tennis etiquette that are rarely violated at professional matches. They began cheering for every Parks error. They cheered when she missed a first serve. They cheered loudly when she hit balls long or into the net. They cheered inappropriately when she double faulted. In the emotional heat of the moment, passionate fans who probably didn't know any better violated the unwritten rules of tennis sportsmanship. Tennis tradition dictates that you applaud good play and remain silent during points. You don't cheer for your opponent's mistakes. You certainly don't cheer for double faults. It's considered poor sportsmanship, and it's exactly the kind of behavior that can fire up a competitor who's already struggling. Moreover, that's precisely what happened to Alicia Parks. The American player later told reporters that the crowd behavior was extremely difficult to deal with, but that she ultimately used it as motivation. She got angry, she got focused, she channeled all that negative energy into her game. She stopped worrying about winning fans over and started worrying only about winning the tennis match. Moreover, her power game, which had been completely dormant in the first set, suddenly came roaring to life. Parks began hammering serves that Ayala couldn't return. She started dictating rallies with her forehand, pushing Ayala back behind the baseline and forcing errors. The confident, aggressive Ayala from the first set was now scrambling, defending, trying desperately to weather a storm that kept intensifying with every game. Parks took the second set 6-3, and suddenly, This match that had looked like a coronation, like a triumphant announcement of a new star, was now a genuine dogfight. The dream was slipping away. The third set was absolutely brutal to watch.